Hello Champagne Dreamers, welcome back to my channel. I'm your girl, Miss Jaye. Or maybe today I should call you my Champagne Nightmares. Today we're going to be getting into some great horror content. If you watched my channel intro video, which if you missed it I'll link it up in the cards, but you know that I'm not just about the makeup. I love my three favorite things, which are glam, geek, and gore. So today we're going to do a little bit of fun horror content that is a little bit of gore and also brings in some of the geek element, because I love documentaries and I love that they're starting to do a lot more horror themed documentaries. And so I wanted to talk about what are some of my favorites. So today I'm going to be giving you my top 6 favorite horror documentaries. If that sounds interesting to you, just hang around. We're going to get into it right now. I decided to do this because I was inspired by just the number of horror documentaries that have been coming out in recent years, and also because they are working on a new documentary about my favorite slasher movie from the 80s, Sleepaway Camp. There's a documentary that's in production right now called Angela, which is going to cover the whole Sleepaway Camp series, the character of Angela and how those films developed, and they've got a ton of interviews with cast and crew from all 3 of the main movies. I think they've got some people maybe even from part 4, which was kind of a continuation. They might be talking to people from the fan film. It could go anywhere. And I am really loving that they're starting to do more documentaries about horror and about those classic horror genre pieces. Now, there are a couple of honorable mentions that I want to tell you about before we get into this list. If you haven't seen a lot of horror documentaries, there are a couple that I think are really fun if you're ready, if you're willing, if you're able to put in the time, and they are Never Sleep Again and Crystal Lake Memories. And those are 2 documentaries that are about the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise as well as the Friday the 13th franchise. So the reason why you have to be ready, willing, and able to spend a little bit of time is that I think the Nightmare on Elm Street one is about 4.5 hours, and the Crystal Lake Memories, the Friday the 13th one, is about 6.5 hours. So they are meaty, but they've got interviews with so many cast members, crew members, and they really go into the story and the history of each individual movie in the franchise. So they're a lot of fun, they're a lot of information, and they're great for fandom if you want to kind of catch up on those films and reminisce. I think they're a great option. They didn't end up in my list, but they are a lot of fun, and I think for people who are fans of those franchises, they're great options. Now, Friday the 13th is also my favorite of the big slasher series, and there is another documentary that's a little bit shorter called His Name Was Jason. That's a little bit of the history of the character. I don't know where that's available. I got it as a free gift with something else that I bought. I think I got it with some sort of horror movie gift pack or something, but it's just kind of a fun movie. I thought it was really well done, and so I put that in the honorable mentions as well. The last of my honorable mentions is one called Just Desserts, which is one of those retrospective documentaries all about Creepshow, which was directed by George A. Romero, and it was based on short stories by Stephen King. And so it's a really fun look at how that film was made. Again, it's not one of my top 6, but it's definitely one that if you exhaust that list, that it's definitely worth checking out. In my number 6 spot, I have the documentary American Scary. So American Scary is a documentary. I know it was available on Netflix for a while. I think it's available on Amazon Prime, but it's a documentary all about horror hosts, which I think are fascinating. So Elvira, Vampira, Svengoolie, son of Svengoolie, all of those people, these personalities that would host late night movie nights on local cable channels. I think they are fascinating. I certainly have been digging into that tradition. I have been hosting a series of late night film nights at my local community theater, the Fire Hall Theater in Grand Forks, North Dakota. I call it Miss Jaye's Friday Night Frights, and we've been showing a lot of the great indie movies that I've been finding as I've gone to Days of the Dead horror conventions. And so I love that sort of horror hosting aspect. And now that we're in the grips of Mean Miss Rona, I've been trying to figure out new ways to sort of invent that horror hosting aspect. And I think that online, some sort of local horror host sort of thing might be something worthwhile to look into. So I was very excited by that documentary. There were a lot of really interesting personalities, and it just gave a lot of the history of that piece of the horror community that was really fun to look at. The next one, number 5 on my list, is the documentary Room 237. And Room 237 is a documentary that's a little bit bananas. You just have to kind of sit with it and listen to what it's saying. You don't have to buy into everything, but it's all about exploring Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. And so basically there are 4 sections of the documentary where they talk about 4 different theories of what Kubrick was trying to say with The Shining. And so they create these cases for this is what Kubrick was trying to say. So for example, one of the sections is all about one person's argument that The Shining really includes all of these clues that Stanley Kubrick was trying to say that he staged the moon landing. That's always been sort of a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory thing that, people don't argue that we've been to the moon, but they think that the moon landing footage was filmed on a soundstage and that it was faked. Who knows whether or not that's true, but people are saying that you can read certain clues in The Shining where Stanley Kubrick is trying to say, without saying, that he did in fact stage the footage of the moon landing. And so there's some really interesting things talking about, at one point Danny is wearing a sweater that has the Apollo takeoff on it, and he stands up, he's playing on the carpet, and the sort of the direction of the carpet, and he stands up and it's like the rocket lifting off. And so it was really interesting to kind of see that argument. Another person was arguing that it was Stanley Kubrick's sort of history of the mistreatment of Native people by the white man, which was really interesting, and talking about some of the imagery of the artwork in the hotel, and even like the Calumet baking powder in the kitchen, that some of the things, the way things were placed, that it was really meticulous. And some of it seems a little way out there, but at the same time, Kubrick was really smart, he was really eccentric, and he was known for being very specific about how he built details into his films. So, people say, oh, you're just picking this apart till it's not fun anymore. And it's like, but Kubrick might have actually put some of those things into the movie. So it's really interesting to listen to these 4 sort of accounts of this is what I think The Shining is trying to tell us. So I really loved that one. It's definitely one that you have to kind of sit with. It's really easy to be like, what? That's crazy talk. But if you just kind of sit and let it wash over you, and even if you don't buy into it, it's really interesting to see how they build their arguments. So number 4 on my list is To Hell and Back, the Kane Hodder story. A lot of people know Kane Hodder from his work in all kinds of horror movies, Victor Crowley, the Hatchet series, those kinds of things. But he's probably best known as playing Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So he had 4 installments that he was in, and he's really kind of developed a very specific way of playing that character. The physicality is very different from other people who've played Jason in the past. And he's done a ton of stunt work. One thing that I found out at one of the last Days of the Dead that I went to that I thought was really interesting is I remember watching Days of Our Lives with my mom when I was a kid, and there's this really famous scene where Roman Brady is, like, there's one where he goes off a cliff and sort of rolls down this hill, and there's also one where he's hanging from a helicopter, and both of those were Kane Hodder. He did the stunts for Roman Brady on Days of Our Lives, which I thought was really cool. But this is his story, his growing up, what it was like. He grew up being bullied and got into stunt work and martial arts and things like that. He had an accident where he was doing a fire stunt for a local reporter, and things went wrong, and they talk about it, and he ended up having extensive burns across his body. And he talked about the painful healing process. There's some tears in this documentary. You wouldn't think big, rough and tough guy like Kane Hodder playing Jason Voorhees. There's some tears, so be ready. It's a really wonderful story. I think it's really inspiring. And it's a really interesting look at somebody who just really cares about the genre. Kane Hodder is absolutely dedicated to horror genre, and I think it's wonderful. I think it's sweet. And I also just really love it because he is a fairly frequent guest at Days of the Dead, and he's a sweet, wonderful teddy bear of a man. I adore him. So definitely check out To Hell and Back, the Kane Hodder story. Number 3 on my list is a fairly new movie. This is now available on Shudder, so if you have Shudder, you'll be able to watch it. And that is... see the little rainbow Freddy Krueger. Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street, which is all about Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, which starred Mark Patton as Jesse Walsh, one of the few male Scream Queens, and probably the first male Scream Queen in the slasher genre. The film is really interesting because it goes into Mark's history and growing up as a closeted gay man in the 80s, becoming an actor, and what it was like in Hollywood at that time. There was this AIDS panic that was happening with Rock Hudson. When Rock Hudson was outed as having AIDS and then he died, it caused this whole disruption. And Mark, of course, is trying to become a movie star, and he's trying to, you know, build his career, and he's so excited, and he gets this lead role in a hot new horror franchise. So Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1 was such a huge deal. So when he found out that he had been cast as the lead in this film, he was over the moon, and it ended up in some ways destroying his career. And so this is a really fascinating look not only at the making of Nightmare on Elm Street 2 and the story, and you get a really interesting sort of perspective on Jack Shoulder, who's the director, and David Chaskin, who is the screenwriter. And I think the editing is masterful because you go into it and you're so ready to hate somebody. There's a person that they kind of set up as being the villain of the piece. I mean, it's a true story and it's a reflection on all this stuff, but they set somebody up to kind of be the bad guy, and then it sort of turns at the end, and you have a whole different view on so many of the people involved. I thought it was so well done. We were lucky enough last year during Pride to be able to screen. We did an early advanced screening of Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street as part of our Pride celebration. We did a double feature as part of Miss J's Friday Night Frights, where we watched the documentary and then followed it up with Nightmare on Elm Street 2. And it was so much fun. I got to chat with Mark through email. I was going to have him on the podcast. It may still happen, so you can check the description box for links to my podcasts on SoundCloud. I was super excited to get a chance to show this movie. It was such an honor. It's a beautiful story. It's a sad story, but it's got a really wonderful ending. So I really loved Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street. Number 2 on my list is a Shudder exclusive. If you haven't figured it out by now, you should be subscribed to Shudder. If you like horror, you definitely should be watching Shudder. They have a short mini series of documentaries called Cursed Films, which is really interesting. A lot of them are kind of predictable, like The Omen, The Exorcist, Poltergeist, anything to do with sort of demonic stuff. There's always the rumors that it's cursed or whatever. But the one about the Twilight Zone movie is fascinating. I didn't know that had happened, and just hearing about it and the sort of end of the auteur period, fascinating. But that's not what we're looking at. Number 2 is a Shudder exclusive, and that is the documentary Horror Noire, A History of Black Horror. And it really looks at the history of Black people in horror, and also horror made by Black people and for Black people. So looking at how depictions of Black people have changed in horror throughout the years, but also how those changed and developed and responded when Black actors and directors and creators were involved in crafting the horror. And it really traces these different eras of Black representation in horror, and it's really fascinating. They talk about, you know, the very earliest, all the way back to even Birth of a Nation, which a lot of people don't think of as a horror film. White people don't. Racist white people certainly don't. But that a lot of people, if you look at it, especially in our modern context, and look at Birth of a Nation, and know that it was endorsed by the President of the United States, it feels like a horror film. All the way up to now, we have people like Jordan Peele, who, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I am waiting for everything that Jordan Peele does from now until the day that he dies. I am obsessed with both Get Out and Us. I've even thought about signing up for that damn CBS streaming service just to watch The Twilight Zone. I'm sad that he's not directing it, but I'm excited that he produced the new remake of Candyman that just came out. I try not to do the really expensive video on demand. I wait until they're a little cheaper, or I wait till they're free on one of the streaming services. But I think I'm going to pay for Candyman because I am so excited. Candyman is one of the few horror movies that legitimately scared the shit out of me. Because usually what I love about horror, my enjoyment of horror, comes from the fact that my rational brain is able to completely shut itself off. So I can turn on a horror movie and I am terrified. It doesn't matter how cheesy it is, it doesn't matter how bad the effects are, I give in. And it's like I'm a fourth grader all over again. And I just watch it and I'm like, and I'm just panicked and it's anxiety and it's like, but in a good way, not like in a bad way. But I'm so nervous and I'm scared and I'm terrified, and then I turn it off and immediately my rational brain kicks in and is like, this is why you don't have to worry about this, you're gonna be okay. And I talk myself out of it and I'm great, and I just enjoyed the experience. Like, I enjoyed the feeling of it. Candyman is one of the few that my rational brain was like, I'm out. I don't know what to do. I can't help you right now. I'm over here in the corner pissing myself. So I loved Candyman. I have never been able to watch that movie and then immediately go over to a mirror and say Candyman into a mirror 5 times. I can't do it. I cannot do it. I realize that it's some sort of superstition. I don't care. I know the devil when he takes human form. Like, we don't play with that kind of shit. Like, I just am not going to do it. So I love that, and that movie is really great. They've got interviews, actors and directors and academics who study this sort of thing, and podcasters, and it's really, really, really well done. There is also a series on Shudder of outtakes from the interviews. So there's a horror noir podcast that is also part of it, which is the outtakes from the interview that didn't make it into the documentary. So if you watch it and you want more, there's even more that's all available on Shudder. I know it sounds like a commercial for Shudder. This always happens in my video. I just talk about the shit that I love, and then people are like, did somebody give you like $20 to talk about this? No, I just love Shudder. If they wanted to, like, I would do commercials for you, Shudder. Pay me, like, sponsor me. Sponsor a bitch, but I just love it. I'm a big fan. So spot number 2 belongs to Horror Noire, A History of Black Horror. And in my number 1 spot, I love this movie. I love this movie. I'm obsessed. I cannot wait to do this as part of a double feature. I need Mean Miss Rona to pack her bags and get the fuck out of town because I need to do this as a double feature. I'm so excited. If you have not seen the movie Troll 2, it is bizarre. It's terrible. The acting is ridiculous. The story is ridiculous. It's just bananas. It's so bad. But it, over the years, has developed this weird sort of cult following where it's featured in a lot of midnight showings and things like that. And there's a documentary all about the making of Troll 2 featuring the original cast. And it's actually directed by somebody who was in the original cast. He played the little kid, the main little kid in the movie. This is so good. So the documentary is called Best Worst Movie. It is a fantastic exploration. You get to meet all of these people who were involved in it, and it's just such an interesting mix of personalities. The guy who played the dad is a dentist in Alabama or Arkansas, I can't remember, I think it's Alabama. And he's just like an odd guy. He's very friendly and just smiley and giggly, and he puts on one of those inflatable fat suits and gets pulled on rollerblades behind a truck in the, like, city parade every summer, and is just ridiculous. And he spends, like, part of a year going on tour to horror conventions, touring and talking about Troll 2, and that's part of what they document. The woman who plays the mother it's so tragic, it'll break your heart. I mean, just her section is so sad. And just some of the other people, and the person who played the sister, she's still a working actress, and she talks about the challenges of having Troll 2 on your resume and what that experience is like. And the director is this Italian guy, and he seriously thinks that it's like one of the great films of all time. And his wife, who was the screenwriter, she wrote it apparently because she was mad at vegans or some shit. Like, it just is ridiculous. The whole thing is so ridiculous, and this documentary captures all of it perfectly. So my number one best horror documentary is Best Worst Movie. So those are my top 6 best horror documentaries. What did you think? Have you seen any of them? Which ones do you like? Which ones do you not like? Are there any that you would recommend that I see? Drop them down in the comments, because I always love finding new great horror documentaries. And even if they're not about horror, if you've got interesting, fun, weird documentaries, I would love to see them. I may do a whole other video counting down some of my favorite other documentaries as well, because I just love a fun exploration of interesting, weird, unique people. I love, and situations and movies and all that kind of stuff. So I love a good documentary. So if you know something that you think I should watch, or if you want to argue with any of my choices on my list, go ahead and leave it down in the comments below. Well, that is our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, I would really appreciate it if you'd give me a thumbs up on the way out. It really does help, and it's free. If you'd like, please hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you can get notified of all future uploads. If you'd like to chat, banter, or commiserate between uploads, all of my social media will be linked down in the description box. And you can also check out my website, The World of Champagne, at janessajay.com. Thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And until I see you again, bye. I am going to add a little bit of glitter highlight.
You say that and you're going to like turn around. And
Sparklefish. Did you want to sit down?
Kind of.
Okay, sit down. Ah! Oh!
I'm good.
Remember that time you almost died?
Remember that time I broke 2 lawn chairs in one day because I sat to the side? We'll see that happen with
Girl.
the chair.
And Gore. What's going on?
I want to blast you a little bit more. Okay. Because you're really looking dark.
Oh, okay.
Okay, sorry. Redo!
Okay.
I'm not going to sit this time.
Okay. Horror, and about this classic horror genre. Pieces. We'll edit that space out, so it's almost like I said it all at once. The reason why you need to be ready, willing, and able to put in some time is that they are long. I think the Never Sleep Again is about 4.5 hours. There's a car with way too much bass driving by that I'm sure you can hear. We'll give them a second to drive by with their tiny penis. And the last one for the honorable mentions is one called Just Desserts. And that is about a 2-hour documentary, maybe a little, it might be a 90 minute to 2 hour. Who cares? There may be 92 minutes, or there could be 97 minutes, or there could be 99 minutes. All of the different personalities that would host these late night horror hosts that would... Number 4 on my list of best horror documentaries is To Hell and Back, the Kane Hodder story. Fuck you people! Toxic masculinity. Fuck it in the ear. Ugh.